off. All right. Okay, so we get started in a minute. We'll have a brief round of introductions, and then we can get started on the musings. So, for those who are joining for the first time today, Anand and Natty, so Scott and one other lady called Dolan and I, we've had a few sessions, and so we had been picking up some of the musings every week and just talking about them. But I'm going to just step back and ask if either of you read any of the musings, and then we can just start from there and then pick it up, and then whatever naturally we can, if you have any particular questions or any comments or any reactions that arose for you when reading any of those musings, we can pick those up and we can discuss it as a group. So with that, why don't we just begin, and I'd like everyone to just introduce themselves briefly, please, and where you're from, what brings you here, and just like 30 seconds about yourself, 30 seconds to a minute, and then we can get started. Anand, would you like to go?
Sure. So I met Pravir at Zappos. I was doing a project there. I've got a theoretical physics background and then applied maths, and then did a petroleum engineering master's, most of my career has been in oil and gas consulting and oil field development. For the last 25 years, I've also had an interest in personal development and spiritual development and various practices that, especially stages that move people through stages of adult development and then into what Wilbur and Terry O'Fallon call the meta-aware tier, so into states, altered states, states of consciousness, non-dual states. What I didn't realize early on in my spiritual development, that I was trying to go this way, whereas I wasn't properly embodied, so now I'm trying to go this way and become more ordinary, human and normal. So that's my aspiration, to have a nice ordinary day with incredibly interesting humans.
Thanks, Anand. And that's so interesting. I mean, I think many of us perhaps do that similar thing that you're talking about, because even if I think about myself, earlier in my life, I had some unusual experiences, and then it took me a long time to get quote unquote embodied. So I can completely relate to that. Who'd like to go next? Natty?
Me?
Yeah.
So it's my first time. Okay. So I know Pravir as well. Unrelated to Pravir, I started to have a passion about all the idea of quantum, mainly from organizational point of view, which probably is like a little bit weird point of view, but for me, it feels that individual and teams are actually working the same as this, following the same rules that the subatomic is working as well, and I find it fascinating. And when Pravir spoke about the cosmology of light, I found it very interesting. So I'm here. My background is IT, so I use all of my history is IT. When I became a CIO, I started to hate IT, and I found myself falling in love with helping people, and then throughout my career, I was exposed to complex adaptive system, Pravir, and chaos theory, and that's kind of initiate my way of thinking. And not so something like Zappos, I implemented. We ran all the IT without any hierarchy. I think it's been even a little bit more to the left than Zappos. And I truly believe, so I can't connect the dots, but I feel that there is some deep connection between my history, what I'm doing right now, and what Pravir is talking about. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Natty. It's great to have you here. And so Natty and I have also been working together for the last several months. We just co-authored a paper on complex systems that in fact we just presented earlier this morning at a conference in India, and we are also working on a complex adaptive systems project at one of Natty's clients. So there's been some crossover in the last few months, and there's a lot of things that are common, which is great. So great to have you. Scott, would you like to go next, please?
Yeah, I work in marketing, but I've always been fascinated by science and physics as a way to sort of answer questions that have driven me my whole life, thinking about what consciousness is, what am I, why am I here, what is all this stuff, what is it all for? And science only took me so far, and then about a year and a half ago, I was introduced to the concept of energy healing and a specific energy healing modality called color puncture, which uses colored light and the acupuncture meridians and system. And it opened my eyes and sort of started this spiritual awakening for me. And I started to consider spiritual knowledge, more esoteric and spiritual knowledge as well. And I've been sort of on that road, learning about all these new concepts, and then also still thinking about how some of them interact with what we know about in science, and how some of those concepts can take it even further. And I think that's where the cosmology of light comes into play, because it takes us outside of conventional science, but also still looks at things from that a scientific perspective, but also brings about all these spiritual themes as well in, you know, what we can learn about ourselves and our lives and how to enrich our lives and our path moving forward.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And Scott and I have had some really good conversation, and he has a podcast. And I think a couple of weeks ago, we had a very detailed dialogue on his podcast, which will probably be aired in March sometime. So looking forward to that one as well. Dolan?
What's the podcast?
Yeah, Anna?
It's called Remember Your Light podcast.
Okay.
Yeah. Dolan, please introduce yourself.
I'm Dolan, and I have been attending a few of your musings from now, and I have a background in microbiology with some parts in clinical microbiology and some parts in molecular biology. So when you talk about light affecting cells and how it affects the biology, it really fascinated me. And also I'm here to learn about the other aspects of light and how the speed of light changes different formations in matter. So that was really very fascinating for me. So I'm just here to learn more. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dolan. And Dolan, really, it's been a pleasure to have you on these musings, and you ask some really difficult questions, which keep me, on my toes and keep me honest. So I really appreciate your kind of involvement in this. So I think we have a great group here, and it's, by the way, a very international group. And I think each of you are in different parts of. I know Anand is in the UK, and I think Dolan, you're in Canada somewhere, right? Yeah, and then Scott currently in Florida, and Natty's in Texas, and I'm in San Francisco.
This is the silver lining of pandemic. Like so many people, so many forums, people from so many countries are getting together.
Yeah. Okay, great. So with that, let's get started. And let me just begin by asking that I changed the format this time because previously we were going through some of the musings sequentially, but I wanted to experiment with just opening out any musing for consideration. And if you have read any of the musings, if you can please talk about it a little bit, or if there's comments that you have, or if there was a point of view that surfaced for you, then please share and we can begin to discuss it as a whole. And I can summarize, I can pick up where you, once you kind of comment on whatever you saw. So. So presume, did you all read a little bit of the Musings? Let me start there.
And you want me to start?
Yeah, sure, Natty, go ahead.
Yeah. So I read the first 5.
Okay, awesome.
Because that's what they're saying that you have to read before. So so honestly, it's hard. I don't feel that I got everything from reading it once, so I need to go and read it twice.
Yeah.
But the first thing that kind of jumped into my mind is entropy. So light is subject to entropy.
Oh, sorry, say again. Light is
subject to entropy as well. True.
Yes, I think a certain kind of light is subject to entropy, so we can talk about that. Yeah.
Okay, so like my question is, if light related to that, how, if this is the light that you're talking about, how it's all connected together? Because in my simple brain, if light goes to entropy, there's kind of a conflict between what I read and what I know. Okay, make sense?
Sure. Okay, so let's talk about that. I think that's a good starting point. And here in the cosmology of light, the assumption is that you have light traveling at different constant speeds. And so, of course, we're aware of this light that's measured in our physical universe of 186,000 miles per second. But the point of view here is that light's native state is one where it travels infinitely fast. And that creates a different kind of reality, and that would not be subject to entropy because there's a different set of laws that are operative. So if I think about entropy, to me, when I just step back and ask what entropy is, it's a mechanism by which resources are redistributed in real time. And they're redistributed to any endeavor that can use them better than the endeavor that they're on currently. Mm-hmm. So meaning that something begins to get subject to entropy when it's exceeded its lifespan, or when the important work that it had to do is over. And therefore there's a process of decay that sets in, and whatever energy, materials, and resources that are attached to that process now get redistributed to something else that can pick them up better. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I think about entropy. So then the question is, if you have light traveling infinitely fast, where we're assuming just through thought experiment, that's a different kind of reality. So there's no entropy because everything is, in a sense, perfectly in its place. But when you begin to have light traveling at 186,000 miles per second, then you already have separation. So matter materializes in a certain way. So there's distinction that begins to become clearer as per how we perceive things. And everything is subject then to time and space. And so there's a different kind of time that kicks in, there's a different kind of space that kicks in. And in that time, that's where we begin to see entropy playing out. Because if something cannot mature as per what's in its seed or what's deeply inside it, then those resources will be reallocated to something else that can take it and mature whatever is kind of like in the seed of the idea that exists in space. So that's kind of a rough answer, but let's open it out. What do you think, Natty, others, when you hear that, or what's your sense of what I just said?
So my thinking is, we're speaking about light at stage C, like it's the Big Bang, yeah. Mm-hmm. So if we are subject to any physics laws, the Big Bang start to decay. So from the Big Bang forward, we're just decaying, okay? So I still have some. I understand what you're talking about, okay?
Yeah.
But I found kind of internal conflict in my head between, okay, so there's light in space C in vacuum that goes. So I totally agree and understand that, but it's proven to decay as well. So like that's my
Sure,
sense.
sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
I think well, the second law only applies to closed systems. So long as the overall entropy is increasing, then locally order can be created. So the reduction of information. I just pulled up the definition of entropy because there's a relationship to information, which is that the lower the entropy, the less information you need, the less complex information you need to describe the system. And then we talked about in Las Vegas about when the speed of information gets infinitely fast, two things are then simultaneously connected. There's no time as you've gone beyond time and space. So you've gone into this, I guess in spiritual traditions, what you call timeless, boundless. And you need very little information. You need less and less entropy or less and less information to describe it, because at the extreme limit of that is it's non-dual. It's oneness, one without a second. So there's no information needed because there's nothing happening. Nothing's ever happened. Nothing will ever happen, and it's eternal. So that's my understanding, that actually coming from formless into form, the minute you started, you have to start with time and space. Then you can have distinctions. Then you can have description. Then you can have information. Then you can have entropy as a way of describing systems.
I got you. So to summarize, to see if I understood you correctly, so due to the fact that the light is moving so fast, and actually there's no past and future, we are living the current, then there's no any sense of entropy because we are actually not moving anywhere, yeah?
If you take it to a limit, yeah. Yes. So, because Einstein said energy or matter can't travel faster than the speed of light. He never said information can't travel faster than the speed of light, which is why in Bell's theorem you've got information. Is everyone familiar with Bell's theorem?
No.
You want to just summarize?
Do you want to Revere? No, let's have the real physicist.
No, you guys,
not the layman.
Okay,
so Bell's theorem is basically
physics. So please.
All right. So Bell's experiment is basically you've got two particles that created simultaneously. They're traveling away from each other at the speed of light, right? So in theory, they can't communicate with each other because they're going away from each other at the speed of light. So then you measure the spin on one of them. Let's say the spin on this one is up. This one always turns up as down, and likewise the other way around. So somehow they know each other and what's going on for each other.
Yeah.
And the way David Bohm explained this is if you've got a fish in a fish tank, and there's two cameras, one from one side and one perpendicular from the other side. So you've got two images of two fishes, right? And every time this fish turns, that fish turns. So it looks like in space that they're communicating, but in the enfolded reality in the higher dimension, it's only one fish. So when you go far enough into oneness, there's no... what we're experiencing here are reduced dimensional projections of an enfolded oneness in a higher dimensional reality.
Thanks. I know about this.
I hope that makes sense.
The name.
That sounded like a lot of words.
No, I heard about this. So I read about the spin. I know about the spin, and I know that this is something that Einstein didn't like because it's kind of took away the E equal. I didn't know that the name was bound. So thanks.
Yeah, and so the departure here from in this cosmology of light is that, we're considering that light can indeed exist at speeds other than c, and there's a different reality that then it creates or that materializes at those different speeds. So by contrast, something that we discussed in a couple of sessions ago was if light was to project itself at zero speed, then it would, in fact, the kind of reality that would be created would be the opposite of light traveling infinitely fast. So if you assume that when light travels infinitely fast, that there's something that we can recognize in the reality that we call all power, all presence, all service, all harmony, say for instance, then in the opposite, where light can't travel at all, then you have complete weakness, complete darkness. You've got nothing, no knowledge that can be spread because everything is just confined to a simple space. And so this is kind of how we erect this cosmology, in a sense, is by thinking about these interpenetrating worlds that, in a sense, are attached to different layers of light that travel at different speeds. And so that's kind of like just stepping back. That's how the notion of cosmology of light came into being from my perspective.
And I can say one more addition to that. So if you think about, there's various systems. That one comes to mind is the theosophical system of 7 planes of existence going up to emptiness. Most of science only describes what's in physical matter, so in the physical universe. So yes, light that's, travels at the speed c, that's fine, but most of science doesn't really describe anything in the subtle realms. It doesn't claim to describe the physics of subtle realms.
Yes.
Or causal realms.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and I don't know if I'm saying so. I can say whatever I want. It's a
course.
I might be completely wrong, yeah. But when I meditate, so when I meditate, because I can just speak about myself, I see light. But in the point of time that I feel like I reach nothing, actually I don't see any light. It's a dark. It feels great, but it's a dark moment. Okay, like everything stopped. Yeah. So I never thought about it. That's why it's cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and of course, we have certain habitual ways to think of light, but light, I would suggest, is not subject to how we may perceive it in a certain sense. I mean, we're used to imagining light existing in a certain way, but that doesn't mean it cannot exist in another way as well. So.
I seem to be talking a lot. I'll just say a couple more things.
Yeah.
So Barbara Brennan calls that the black velvet void, and she adds in the word velvet to kind of suggest it's nice rather than horrible, right? Because the black void sounds a bit terrible.
What was her name again? Barbara what?
Barbara Brennan.
Thank you.
Right, and in Buddhist terms, I think they call it the clear light of the void. And my experience of it is more like it's not quite light or dark or full or empty, but it's alive. It has aliveness. It's like it's not dead. Basically, that's my experience of it. It's full of potential.
So there might also be a positive intention behind this randomness. Like I was thinking, like what we call randomness and disorder, because different realities of light are being created because of this randomness and disorder. So there must be something influencing this randomness, like even though it might look random to us from the outside, but must be something influencing this randomness because of this very disorder, different realities.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Would somebody like to comment on that, or? Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because when this, if we consider the realm where light travels at 186,000 miles per second, then what we also spoke about in the last session was that you have the kind of converse, or light in a sense creates an upper limit to this bound where we exist in this realm where it's 186,000 miles per second. But if you flip it, if you inverse it, it creates a lower bound. So 1 over c in a sense becomes proportional to what's called Planck's constant, which is the quantity, or like a packet by which sets a mechanism by which matter shows up, in a sense. And so this notion of matter being distinct and being created because light's traveling at 186,000 miles per second in a certain way, to your point, it can all appear, when you look at it from the bottom up, it can all appear completely random. It's very distinct, and everything seems to have its own reality and operate as per its own protocol and set of mechanisms. But then when you look at it from a different way, from, say, if you were able to look at it from another layer of light, you might in fact see that it's a necessary part of the puzzle to drive towards a certain purpose. And so exactly, what you're saying is that just because things may show up randomly or the physical world may appear to work a certain way does not mean that there's no order in it, or that there cannot be another purpose that's actually, in a sense, driving things.
That concept there is almost fundamental to our experience here of the world, is that we, from this perspective, things may appear random. Things are appearing the way that, like, our physical reality is created because of these upper and lower bounds, and the speed c that we experience. And part of our evolution and expansion here, and what we get to learn and what we get to figure out, is that there is this kind of beautiful order, and this is just one perspective that we're put in, where things on a physics level may appear really random, and events that happen in our lives may appear really random and sometimes cruel and horrible, but those are all there as catalysts for us to get a glimpse at kind of this greater unity and this kind of beautiful order. I think this concept also comes out of complex adaptive systems, and I've heard you talk before about how something like the pandemic may seem really random, but if you look at it from a complex adaptive systems perspective, you can kind of see this happening. Like, it makes sense. It can all be put into context in some way. So it's kind of like you said, zooming out and looking at it from that perspective. We get the opportunity to do that because of this situation that we're in.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. Absolutely. Natty, would you like to say anything about complex adaptive systems from that point of view, the randomness versus order?
So no sense to repeat what you said. So randomness, there's a logic, there's order in the chaos. Mm-hmm. So that's what even chaos theory will teach you even better than complex adaptive system. There's a if you look at any, even visually, in way that you depict chaos, you see order and pattern within that. So Eastern philosophy, yin yang, everything is connected. So connected, yeah. But you said it already, so I'm just rambling because you told me.
Thank you.
I've got some jumping off thoughts.
Yeah, awesome.
So there's a temptation, I think, to want to come to an absolute frame, right? And that in itself is a problem. So what you'll hear often is the world seems random, but actually on a spiritual level, nothing's random. But then nobody knows that. That's just another hypothesis, right? So to then arrive at that actually chaos is a way of looking at things, and order is also a potential way of looking at things. And there may be some things. So I like this quote from Niels Bohr, you probably heard it, which is, the opposite of a correct statement is a false statement, but the opposite of a profound truth may well be another profound truth. Mm. And I think at these levels, being able to hold contradictory perspectives that may not be resolvable, and take them for what they are, because there's a way in which there's a beauty to the randomness, but also a different lens to look at reality is that there's nothing random, but it's still a lens. It's a subjective experience. And then there's this that came to mind. So I'm just dumping a load of stuff into the space.
Awesome.
Which is Dave, I've forgotten his name now, the Carnarvon Framework. You familiar with that one?
Yeah, Dave Snowden.
Dave Snowden. So if you click on that link, you'll see there's simple, which is just simple. Then there's complicated, which means you can describe it. Is that right? Then there's complex. You say it because you know it better than I do. And
So
then
I have to open it because I disagree with him, by the way.
that's
Oh, is
okay.
that right? Really? Yeah.
Yeah, I disagree.
But it's just a model. He thinks it's the truth.
Well, it's okay. Like as you said, that there are many truths, so no problem.
Actually,
Um,
Vera, if you let us share, then I can put it on the
Sure,
screen.
sure.
So
Absolutely.
while Natty talks about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that. Just
More than I am.
wrong, yeah. But I once debate with him for a long time.
You should be able to share now, Anand.
Okay, one sec. Share.
It's pretty deep one, yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
Ah, okay, cool. So I think in the beginning they never had the tightly or decoupled or loosely titled, which is cool. But you see, it's slightly different from what you said, yeah. So he's looking at that from like where you can have any kind of influence and where you don't have influence at all, yeah. And he believes that there are, so first of all, he called them state, which means that you can move between each one of them in any way, shape, or form, okay? I think that usually stuff like anything that moves between something move between stages and not state. And I kind of, I think that chaos or everything chaotic, it's actually a process that move something from simple to complex, and then back from complex to simple through entropy. That's the reason why I asked about entropy. So I look at it completely different. I don't know why you brought it.
Let me do a like this is what I thought was it's obvious is when you understand something, it's pretty straightforward. You know, you roll a ball down a slope, you can measure the speed, you've got Newton's mechanics, it's all very straightforward. Complicated, it's still describable with a model in a predictable fashion, but you just haven't got to it yet. So if something seems too difficult to understand, but it can be understood, right? Complex is when you've got emergent processes like human beings, and when they go through, like a complex system goes through a bifurcation, it's more like the Schrödinger equation, so it can collapse into different waves into different stable states, and you don't know what's going to happen, so it's not easily predictable in time going forwards.
It's not predictable
And
at
this
all.
is your kind of complex system. Chaotic, the claim is where you cannot, it's Brownian motion, you're not going to be able to predict where the molecules are going, however complicated, however complex a model you had for it. And the key distinction he makes is in our world at the moment is the world used to be complicated, so you could forward predict what's going to happen in 2 years, 5 years, 2-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan, etc. But we've moved to a complex world now where you're happily going along with LPs and then CDs turn up, or MP3 players, and just wipe out CDs overnight, or Netflix appears and Blockbuster goes out of business. That we're getting more and more disruptive technologies, but it never gets you to chaotic. So in the shamanic traditions, Don Juan, who was a sorcerer that was talked about by Carlos Castaneda, he talked about something called the tonal and the norgal. And the tonal was unknown, but you could know it. But the unknowable, you will never know, however much you try. So he made those distinctions. That was just the blurt out of the stuff that came to mind when you talked about chaos, about meaning, about.
So let me say something. The way, so an easy way to explain it is like obvious or simple is something that has so few elements that it's obvious, like everything is predictable, okay? In complicated, you still have a lot of elements and they're still connected one to each other. So it takes a lot of time to understand what you're looking at, but still it's predictable. In complexity, there's no predictability. So the number of elements and the connection eventually reach a level that it's impossible to predict how the system will be in the future. And my main problem with this model is that I don't see any difference between complex and chaotic. Because once you reach a level where you can't predict, I don't see the distinguish on the level. Okay, it doesn't really matter. It reach this level and it's like fluctuated based on certain condition between more unpredictability or less unpredictability. So in my mind, chaotic or chaos is a process. It's not a state or a stage. Actually, when those conditions of chaos get into place, you are moving from complicated to complex. And when they are decayed, then you might go back to obvious or simple, or you might simply go disappear.
So sort of chaos is describing the kind of, as things go chaotic and then to simple and chaotic.
Well, I see it that way. He doesn't, okay? And he tried to explain what is different between complex and chaotic, and I don't get it, okay? So if something is loosely coupled, okay, already, what is my odds to predict? So I don't know, like when asking, give me an example between complex and chaotic system, I didn't got a good one. Like all the example that we gave me was actually complex. Yeah. But you know, there's no right or wrong. It's everyone sees the.
No, so this is. I think this is amazing because in a way, there's a way in which there is no difference between these two, and potentially there's a world in which there is a difference between these two.
Let me take a stab at this. I'm not familiar with this, but just in the way that it's presented here and the way that you guys are talking about it, I almost see this rather than a way of describing models and aspects of the world. I almost see this, I'm looking at the way that it says practice. So in a way, I see this as a perspective and a kind of a mode of being. So whereas if we're in an obvious or simple state, when we have no degrees of freedom, in a sense, everything that we believe about the world, we're told about the world. And the world just is as we're told. When we get to complicated, we can actually start to dig into why the world is the way that it is, or why we're told it is the way that it is, and understand maybe the equations that make the world act in the way that it does. When we get up to complex, we take that even further, and maybe we start expanding into our own ideas about. I think this is where you really start expanding into your own ideas about those emergent properties and taking things that maybe you can't pin down with a formula, and this is maybe where people start to disagree and have different theories about emergent properties and why things become the way that they are. And then I see chaotic as, so this is lacking constraint. So in a way, this is accepting the fact that there is truth in everything, and this takes us back to that concept of the truths and the quote that you put up earlier, and this is something I talked about in episode 3 of my podcast, is that you can find truth in everything, but what's exciting about our perspective here is that we get to choose our own path along that. We get to choose what we want to believe, but we can also get to a point where we can see that there's truth in everything, even if we might ultimately disagree with that or not choose to believe in that. We can see the truth in that. And then it says act, sense, and respond. And this is kind of like this is a novel practice. This is where you really get to embody your own experience. You really get to embody your own life path by acting, taking the feedback that you get from those actions into the world, and then changing your behavior moving forward. And that's like the most fully embodied kind of highest level of being within this model here. So I see it as that's how I view it, and it may not be what his intention was at all, but I think it's interesting from that perspective.
So you're doing amazing. It's not the intention, but you're doing an amazing. So the intention is to expand businesses different state and to open people's mind that there is a lot of unpredictability and unknown, and they need to be familiar with it and aware of it. That was his intention. What you've done is something completely different, much more nicer, and you should do something with it because you have something really strong and nice.
Because it's interesting when you listen to Dave Snowden talk, he doesn't sound very open-minded at all. He actually sounds like an incredible dogmatist or ideological.
I argue with him for 2 hours. You can't change his mind. Like he's a PhD and he knows everything, and he set up a company and he worth millions of dollars, and who you are and what you're going to tell me what to do, and you don't know anything, and bye-bye.
So this is in Ken Wilber's work and in Spiral Dynamics. I don't want to take it. We'll come back to light in one, but this is the problem, I reckon, in all organization development. The idea is incredibly complex, but the way it's implemented is basically ideological, imposition, authoritarian, dictatorial, right? So there's now a contradiction between the content is second tier and it's integral and it's this and it's that. But even Otto Scharmer with Theory U, the way it's put across is I'm the expert. So it's in Suzanne Cook-Greuter's model, it's 3.5 out of 8 levels of adult development. Right? It's very low down in terms of I know what I'm talking about. You don't know anything. Let me show you. That's kind of the problem with some of this stuff. Anyway, that's way off.
That's awesome.
It was just to say the point of unknowable. As a human being, I think there are some things we might strive to know, and maybe we can know them. This is the purpose of something like this: it's to investigate and explore and use metaphors and models and things. And then there might be some things that are just unknowable with a human nervous system. Just they're outside of the realm.
Yeah. I also kind of see this at 2 levels, like the model that you described. One is at a very practical, at the level of matter. Like, for example, like complicated and complex would be like how it would come to my mind is like a parent is still there with a child while a child is exploring their individuality, and he's playing or he's trying to fuddle with things, but the parent is still providing some kind of guidance. And random or the chaotic would be for the experience of a child is when the parent is no longer there and the child is totally, utterly confused, and there is no one to guide him to be able to explore his individuality and to explore his creations. There is no one to put any kind of boundary to see, okay, you can explore in this way, like showing him that. So that would be chaotic. And at higher levels, like at the level of matter, what I see is complex and complicated as still that we can somehow glimpse with the mind. Like we can, with like complicated is we have to really struggle hard with concepts and mind, but we are still getting it. Complex would be as though we are trying to get and catch a glimpse of something, but we are not, like as though something is there, but it's vague and we are trying more hard. So it's a degree of higher. But chaotic is something that we cannot even identify with, like it's totally beyond our control, like totally unknown, like how many people have the concept of God and many people can't identify it. So many people name it as unknown. So at the level of that, it would be something that we cannot yet identify with our normal faculties and instruments that we have, like the highest that we call maybe mind or higher mind, we are not able to identify with it.
Thank you. I think that's really well said. And, I've really enjoyed each of you kind of sharing your thoughts. What I want to do is just bring it back to light, but it's all about light. Essentially, it's all about light. But what I want to do is I'm going to share that index to Cosmology of Light, and the reason why is I want to seed something so that if we are to continue, if this group is to continue with the conversation in 2 weeks, and if I think at least several of you have signed up, I want to pick it up because there's something that I want us to kind of look at, the model here. And this was what Dave Nolan's model that you shared, Anand?
Snowden.
Oh, sorry, what's his name?
Snowden.
Snowden. Got it. Okay.
Snowden.
Yeah.
But by the way, next time, if you don't mind, I want to show what I came with, and I want to hear feedbacks. Okay?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I'm going to share my screen and go to let's see. Oh, that's weird. Ah, here we go. Nope. Why? Something weird. Hold on. This just take me a second to sync this up for some
While
reason.
you're saying that, by the way, I
Let-
really like what Scott said, because with my mentor, the kind of the end result is it stops being a teleological orienting principle to the world, and it's more an internal this is woo-woo words, but energetic guidance to the world is too complex to work out. So I'm going to see how I'm moved from an inner sense of inner and outer energetic interaction with the whole. So I'm now, the way I'm living is I'm being it rather than planning into the future. I'm a living expression of this moment.
Okay, awesome. Can you see this screen that just popped up, the index?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I'm just going to narrate a point of view here, but I want us to pick it up the next time in juxtaposition with the conversation that we just had, which I think was very, very relevant to this model. I'm going to just share very briefly. So here, what kind of, if we think about it, we're positing that there's 4 kinds of properties in light that are symmetrical. So no matter what layer of light you're looking at, these 4 are going to show up in different ways. So for example, very concretely, when we think about this layer of matter that we exist in, then we have this 4-fold order that is pretty apparent. So you've got quantum particles. First of all, you've got space-time, energy, gravity, which is a 4-fold order. Then you have quantum particles, which are structured into 4 kinds of particles. You have quarks, leptons, bosons, Higgs boson. Then you have, when you look at the periodic table and the 108 known elements, there's S shell, P shell, D shell, and F shell elements. Again, there's a 4-fold architecture. And then when you look at molecular cells, when you look at cells, rather living cells, there's 4 molecular plans, which are nucleic acids, polysaccharides, lipids, and proteins. And if you consider kind of the trajectory or how this development is taking place, if we go back into the properties of light, which we roughly called knowledge, power, presence, and harmony, then we see that as each subsequent layer of matter or life emerges, then these 4 properties, for example, knowledge becomes a huge set of many, many different elements related to knowledge. And you see this, for example, in the complexity of nucleic acids and what they represent at the level of cells, or when you think about this element of property of light that we call presence, we see how that manifests at the level of a cell in the, say, 30,000 plus proteins that show up in a human cell, which all have different kind of elements of service. So you're seeing that complexity of that one seed element or property emerging as complexification takes place and diversifying. So whatever's hidden inside it becomes more and more apparent. So there's more and more distinction, so that one thing diversifies into many, 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 many different things. And there's apparently no end to that. And so, when you're looking at this notion of something apparently simple or fused as one, because if you take light to be traveling infinitely fast, then these properties of power, presence, knowledge, harmony are one thing, and it's in a sense bound by love. And so you've got this conglomerate where everything is packed into one reality, but then as the differentiation takes place and as things emerge in matter, then there's these 4 things that still want to embrace each other and create a layer of stability. And that again is this notion of love. So we're seeing that what was implicit becomes explicit, but in the explicitness, it's still trying to maintain its unity. And that act of maintaining unity is something we call love. The point being is that there's, in this point of view, you've got, if we think about complicated, if we think about obvious, complicated, complex, and chaotic, there's like a certain kind of order, if you will, where that which is apparently simple becomes much more complex and full, and yet there's that possibility of something quote unquote chaotic or completely misunderstood or just simply that we cannot grasp emerging. But that's what I wanted to seed for our next discussion, whoever is going to take part in it, as a starting point for it. And then we can just explore some of the points of view that have come up today in a little more detail, and also go into the point of view of the arbitration of light. So light existing at a certain layer, when it manifests or materializes at 186,000 miles per second, there's an arbitration of information which takes place through what we can think of as quanta, or as a quantum bridge that connects two layers of light together. So all I'm trying to do is just collapse this all into one thing, in a sense, and just say, okay, how would the different paradigms or the different experiences you describe kind of relate to light from a cosmological point of view? And that's what I'd like to be the starting point for the next discussion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, interesting. We've talked about this before, that the word light, the way you're using it, is a much larger concept. Larger is subjective than how most people use it.
Yeah.
It's a much more all-embracing, it seems to be.
Yeah. Yeah, because how we understand light scientifically as an electromagnetic spectrum with infinite number of frequencies and waves traveling at a fixed speed is our notion of light. But I would argue that itself is a manifestation of light in this realm. It's certainly not confining what light is in its totality, but it's showing an aspect or a figure of what light is, but light's something more as well. So
might have to start calling it uni-light or omni-light or multi-light.
Yeah, to draw a distinction. Yeah, I know.
Holistic light.
Sorry, what was that one?
We kind of have a choice every time to whether view the omnipresence aspect of the light or to defragment itself and to experience the darkness or the other heaviness of the matter. Like every time it's a choice that we are making, and it's not just an individual choice, it's also a collective choice that people are making with each other. And that's how, and I think even in the defragmentation, even in the darkness, the choice that is being made, it's also reflecting something of the whole universal thing, like whole universal, because some people are making those choices. And how is it that some intention is allowing those choices? So maybe there would be something that would be coming out between the play of the light and the dark aspects of the light.
I do think what's the fourth one? It's knowledge, power, presence,
power, and harmony. So power is used very, very broadly. It means like a sense of adventure, of just energy. So there's, again, these things, we're just roughly calling them something, but there's a lot packed into it.
Just building on what Dolan said on the harmony piece, because I think that many people struggle with the idea that fragmentation has a negative connotation, isolation, abandonment, fall from grace, the disconnection from the divine. All of these things about that actually, the way we have this kind of universe is you need distinction, you need differentiation, you need separation. But in our unless you do the transcend and include the complexity and the difference and all those things, people have that as like a hell realm. Like I got thrown out of heaven, or that's the mythical realms. And this return of kind of going, you can't have harmony unless you have harmony between some stuff, right? Otherwise there's no harmony, it just is, right? And so what comes up when Dolan talks about the the fragmentation aspect especially is, people don't like when psychologically they're shattered or feel fragmented. But then how do you have this physical reality unless it's got, or our minds carve it up into bits and shapes, and my glass is separate from me and all those things. So I'm intrigued by that whole kind of differentiation and then the integration bit, as Wilbur would say.
Yes, I find that very correlated with also the concept of ego, like which in spiritual field many call it bad, but ego helps us in the separation, and therefore our own individual ideas that helps, and with that identification with our separateness, it helps us to discover our own path, our own calling. But at the same time, when we reach that higher level of integration, we realize that even in our individual ideas and in our individual calling, there is a sense of oneness. So that ego is, we might call it bad, and the defragmentation and the separation, but it is an essential aspect of evolution.
When you have something at the highest level, like all harmony, within that context is you have every level of harmony and also every level of disharmony, and it's an expression of that love that Pravir was talking about, that we get to experience all of that and integrate all of that, all of those possibilities, into what Dolan said, finding the path that we choose. I think it's a nice exploration and understanding of what love is, that we get to bring all of these different aspects together.
I know, Pravir, you said it was a seed for next time, but I just got too excited, so I had to say something.
No, it's fine. Yeah, and I think that I just wanted to say also that I'll probably broadcast this, and if you let me know if you want me to tag you or not, but I'll probably do it on Facebook, and you can remain anonymous or I can call you out. So just let me know your preference. So, yeah, because I have some people who listen to my stuff whenever I put it out. So I know that there would be some who would be pretty interested in this conversation. So.
Can you
one of them is very smart.
Sorry, say again?
I'm just not so always active on Facebook, so I'm just letting you know it's okay if you tag me or like. So many times I don't notice, or I notice it very late, like kind of.
Okay, sure. Yeah, and what were you saying, Natty?
I said you can tag me, and I hope that Dev Snowden reads your stuff.
Okay, thanks. And then we probably need to connect on Facebook as well. I don't know if we're connected. So.
Pravir, can you put that link in the chat so we can have?
Oh, sorry, which link?
Just to the musings, because I couldn't.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Oh, got it. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah. Okay. There it is. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much, and I hope you have a really good couple of weeks until the next time when we connect. And in the meanwhile, if there's anything, just send me a text or email or whatever. Yeah.
Pravir, I have an idea to throw. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that if you do that every 2 weeks on Clubhouse, so you have the ability to attract other people that will never hear about that.
Okay. So Natty, how does the Clubhouse work? I mean, is that just an audio conversation, or is it
just an audio? So you can create reoccurring events that happen every time in a certain hour, and usually what happens if there are at least 2 people talking, you will see like a lot of people jumping in. So they're listening for a few minutes. If someone finds the topic interesting, then is getting in, and you have a concept of a stage. So you can say just 4 people on the stage, and you can decide who is on the stage and who is not. So like over time, you can add more and more people to the discussion, and I think it's a fascinating field, but I'm sure that not all the people think that way. But there are probably it's easier way to get to other people that might be interested and expose them, because just listening to the discussion, they might find it extremely interesting and they want to say something. And
Okay.
yeah, so I'm just an idea. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And what I might do is I might set that up separately with a different time and just seed it with a couple of people to go through some of the musings sequentially, so that there's kind of like an entry point for people. But yeah, so it's a good idea. I'll certainly set it up, but it may not be with the same group, and just take it from there. And I don't know if you're all on Clubhouse. You are? Okay. Natty is, I know. All right. Okay. All right.
I don't know about it, so
Yeah.
I don't know about it.
You don't know. Yeah. Even I just learned this week. So Natty told me about it earlier. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Bye. Have a good one.
Bye.
I'll see you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Just sent you a text, Pravir, by the way.
Oh, you sent me a text?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. All right. Yeah. See you all. Bye.
Take care.